everybody. Welcome to this talk. Um, I want to start by saying greetings, loved ones. I think it's just a sweet thing to say. So greetings, loved ones. We have found ourselves in the path where it is super clear that the adoption that we thought were going to come from retail is coming from institutions. That's what this whole week is about, if you've had already some conversations around it. It is giving us the state where we had this dream about this decentralized economy, and interestingly, that dream might become true by the most centralized players adopting what we've built. I don't know if that's ironic or poetic, but it seems like that's the case. I think it's a thrilling time for us to build. So this talk is about how to market it better for this adoption. For the this adoption to happen, we must make privacy, and blockchain privacy specifically, feel like it is not just for gambling anymore and for not just online nefarious doings. For this, I think not only us marketers, but the whole industry itself has to serious up a little bit, and I'm trying to help today with this talk to make that happen. To make this practically feasible, we also have to work through the limitations of the technology that we have, and at the same time learn how to market it, how to position it, and how to sell it to the decision makers and how to get there faster. This talk is about our findings so far of what challenges there are in this process, and to know more about the new area of customers that we have and how to reach them and how to get to the decision makers faster. Seemingly, there's only one hurdle left, and we named that the transparency tax, which I'll also talk a little bit more about in this presentation. And by the way, my name is Reka Medvecz, which you might have already known if you came to this talk specifically. I've built community infrastructure before. Now I'm in zero-knowledge infrastructure, which is very focused on privacy. Currently, I'm the marketing director of Boundless Networks, and we are making blockchains work for global finance. So this is the problem space I wake up every day to solve, and I'm very excited to share some of the learnings with you today. So what is the transparency tax? It's what we named this problem space that we found around marketing blockchains and blockchain privacy specifically. It is the feature that we traded for blockchain's superb speed and efficiency. And it is basically that every company that decides to have business on chain is creating a public, fully readable record. It is not terribly good for business. So we can understand that this is an actual problem that we do need to solve for, both on the marketing side and the technical side, to support. It makes any vendor, cash flow system, payment, literally everything about what your business is doing completely readable by competitors, making competitive advantage keeping super, super hard. Currently in 2026, as of today, there's already over 500 million wallets being labeled and tracked. And our infrastructure for doing that and analyzing it, it's just getting better and better. So it's going to get more and more intense of all the data that we know about each and every wallet and what kind of transactions they're doing. Aside from the trillions of volume, there's already over 30 crypto cards that people can pay with in person, creating more and more of this data as well. BlackRock, one of the largest asset managers, has already tokenized treasuries over $2.5 billion worth. Stripe, one of the largest payment infrastructures, also just recently, last year, paid over $1 billion for Bridge, a crypto company, for basically securing themselves stablecoin rails. This is already so much movement, and this is just the peak, I think, for what happened in the last year. And there's way more coming, so I want to make sure that we are prepared of how to ease this transition. And I want to talk more about where the transparency tax shows up, because for this presentation itself and how we think about marketing and selling blockchains these days, we do need to really, really be sure of knowing. I like how the presentation style kind of is messed up a little bit. Anyway, disregard the extra Y in the middle there. So we do need to know more about what problems our customers are facing, actually, and the transparency tax is a pretty big umbrella term for that. So it shows up in B2B payments, treasury management moves, and every single payroll, salary execution. They know everything about what is going on. this isn't only a business data leak problem, because these companies, these institutions that we're trying to talk to, they do have pretty major shareholder obligations, but it's also a big compliance liability. They also have a lot of customer privacy obligations that we cannot disregard, and we do need to make them feel like we're prepared to handle that as well and help them with it. This makes, we can probably agree that this is such a major two-sided problem space with the compliance and also the business data leaking, that privacy could be, as it seemed like in 2026, is one of our last hurdles to getting that adoption that we want to have for blockchains. They were built for this, but we do need to solve for that. There are 3 challenges that I want to talk about a little bit. We know that the transparency tax is being solved by a lot of companies currently, and this week you'll talk with many infrastructure providers, Boundless included. We're building solutions for this, but we do need to, in the meantime, gather, and I think we do have a collective power to figure out how to plan and test our theses and get better at marketing it as well. So I brought 3 challenges today. I am trying to keep this presentation higher level. I know a lot of you have different pain points for already trying to market to this landscape. I'm bringing 3 challenges and then 3 players that solved this previously in different parts of tech or infrastructure that we can take learnings from. And then we will have a little bit of a playbook at the end, because I really think we do have tools in our hand that we can try. And those are things that ideally you can start doing tomorrow. So the first challenge that I brought is the lack of urgency. We've already seen these in our conversations in the last few months and last year, honestly. Privacy still feels like we've been fine without it kind of standpoint, which you might hear a lot of times, or we're still reorganizing. That's on the roadmap, but it's not really something that's super top of mind, which makes sense. But the usual things that we use for creating urgency in marketing, like FOMO, scarcity, or competitive pressure, doesn't really land for infrastructure decisions like this. It doesn't really work the same way. The second is that the buyer is not as clear of a persona. You will see this when you and your team are talking with these entities that, as much as we're accustomed to more of a blockchain partnerships, et cetera, you usually talk to a similar persona that at least has the same level of understanding of crypto and what you're talking about most of the time. For this, in some of the companies that you might be targeting, the buyer persona might be a security officer, a governance lead, or like a whole governance system, a general counsel, a CTO. They all have super various levels of understanding of privacy and crypto and their own needs, especially within the company. So sometimes it is quite hard to push it forward and figure out what they actually want, and do they understand what you're saying to them, and do they respond? So are you on the same level of understanding? It's super different in every conversation. The third challenge that I brought is that every implementation is different. Privacy is a super broad term. Even amongst the Ethereum community, we just basically put that over anything that has anything to do in that realm. So within these conversations, you will find that sometimes clients need something super specific, even for one use case, like, for example, private payroll. We did talk about the issues of payroll a little bit. For private payrolls, one might need a super transparent way where they do have opt-in transparency when regulators come in. They do want to see some of the data that is happening and being generated by this company without generally showing anything on chain. Some might need a completely different solution. So building a full go-to-market for this value proposition is quite hard to do. The lack of urgency was one. The second was the persona being different. And then the solution being, what we're building is not the same thing. It's not one thing for now. Someone might fully speedrun this and have one single solution for all of our privacy needs. We will see. But these problems, I brought 3 teams that can serve as inspiration for us. So let's go with the first one. I brought Chainlink. If any of you don't know, they're an Oracle infrastructure company. They feed real-world data to smart contracts. They've launched quite a while ago, many years ago. But when they did launch, decentralized data feeds were not really a need that people were looking for. So it was a challenging time to market, I'm assuming. But I really like looking back at other companies that are worth admiring and analyzing what they've done before. And all the 3 examples that I brought today were through that analysis. And I brought Chainlink for solving for urgency because what they've done really well is they made the without this or the downside so easily understandable. And they did do some marketing of trying to make oracles happen and do their whole positioning of creating a new category, which they've done brilliantly. But for urgency, what worked really well is they made urgency from the downside instead of the upside. The second, bless you. The second is for solving for the persona problem. I brought AWS. They launched over 20 years ago. They launched Elastic Compute in 2006. And back then, this is a quite difficult product to understand when you're coming into talking with them for the first time. And even then, buying decentralized compute or cloud infrastructure was not on the to-do list for most people, as you can imagine. But what they've done, and amongst many things, what I want to highlight is they gave a free tier to developers very early on. And instead of forcing conversations just through trying to find the buyer within the company, they built the adoption from inside out, and the business case built itself. So the lesson here is to target the person who's closest to the work, and then the sale will be easier once there's some adoption already, maybe even within that entity. It does make it a little bit harder to figure out what the business model might be, because if you are giving a free tier, there will be a paid tier. But when we're doing sales and marketing around privacy, so far what worked really well is the original sales structure of having something small to start with and then upselling works really well. And I think this example with AWS also solves that, is having something simple to start with and then moving on from that. The third one I brought was Railgun. They are a privacy protocol on Ethereum, and they launched at probably one of the most difficult times, I would say, for anything privacy to launch, because they did it when Tornado Cash, a mixer protocol, received its sanctions for facilitating criminal activity on chain. So they launched into a market that was not only difficult to understand, but it was also heavily stigmatized, major uphill battle. And I brought them today for solving for implementation, because if you look back at what they've done over the years, even if you could scroll back on their Twitter, but you could also find this out through just private conversations, actually. But what they've done is that instead of trying to fully make a new product trying to get customers to fully adopt this completely new product or buy into this new category, they've built it into the DeFi applications that people already used for lending, swapping, providing liquidity without unshielding their wallets. And so I imagine this was insanely hard to do on the business development side and actually make this happen as like a signed deal and getting approval and all of that. So kudos to them. And they did do some, obviously, like positioning and definition around privacy itself. But what worked really well is not making the customer change what they were doing. Instead, they focused on putting it where they were already having activity. So the lesson here is to adapt the product to the user and not the other way around, which also sounds like to me at least, sounds like such a cliche, but I think it's important for us to think that way. The 3 challenges and the 3 solutions that we have today, I'm synthesizing them into 3 different steps. Ideally, these are still, we could have gone super deep. I think 20 minutes is not enough to go into the depths of the details that were the problems we have. So I wanted to make a presentation that can apply to more of you in the room or those of you watching at home. The major difficulty with this is building the funnel that we've already had for blockchain, because I'm assuming most already have that figured out, or at least to an extent, and to turn this funnel to a completely new audience and essentially dividing yourself between 2 different marketing styles and adoption styles and figuring out these challenges. And why it was important for us to understand the transparency tax is that's the major problem space you're looking to hit home with your customers. So let's get into the playbook. The first one is to make the downside impossible to ignore. We've talked about this with Chainlink itself. what I want to encourage here is to dig up data and make forensic, readable, undeniable, undisputable works of information, number-based information that you can show your clients. If you are a more brave or more antagonistic marketer or company, you can position this aggressively as pinpointing the cost of privacy with the numbers, specifically for an ecosystem or a competitor, of what it costs for them to not have privacy. Personally, I don't like doing that. We're more of a wholesome project at Boundless, and me personally as a marketer, I like to do a little bit more of an less antagonistic positioning, but if you're into that, you could do this publicly. However, for everyone, I recommend this to do internally for sales conversation to enable the team and to showing clients what it actually costs for them to not do anything with numbers is very, very powerful and hopefully getting to a yes sooner. The second is narrowing the persona. This sounds so much simpler and something you probably think about often, or one thinks about often when we're building all of this, but it will be very tempting with figuring out such a widening of the funnel and having this completely new platforms. Now you have to do LinkedIn, now you have to be serious about your email marketing, all of these new channels and new conferences to go to, et cetera, et cetera. It will be super tempting to have all these messaging packs developing from your current system. It will make the job harder. So I really recommend to take the really hard exercise and focus on having 2 or 3 messaging packs itself. You can still have as many personas as possible and that you can iterate the solution itself, since it's so custom that we've talked about with the challenges, that every implementation will be different. You should take the route that those are custom in every conversation, obviously suited to the client's needs. But for persona, in terms of messaging packs, of how you talk about generally your solution, what your initial offering is, it should not be more than 2 or 3. It will get more confusing. If you manage to narrow it down, it will more likely lead to faster decision-making processes and sign deals. And the last one I brought is my favorite thing that we've implemented with the Boundless team, is something that anything we do internally and externally we use all the time, is where we start with, is the mentality of thinking bigger. I really want to encourage everybody to try to zoom out as often as possible. There's always a larger picture, a larger solution, and a more collaborative one. And it will increase momentum, it will increase belief in people, and it will just do you so good. So I really encourage you to, any decision you're making, any plan you're trying to do or new venture, try to think bigger. In this case, I brought it to take the message outside of crypto. It is going to be that most themes won't do, because I'm assuming from the conversations and what I've seen, people are very over-indexing on the relationships and the rapport they have within the blockchain industry already. And it is more comfortable than going outside of it and starting it over again. It is much easier to go from the momentum that you have within this niche than to also add a new one to it. It's going to be so much work. But this is why this is going to work for the teams that adopt this sooner, is you do have to go to the finance conferences. You do have to start over again and educating people and start a little bit more from a less focused point of view. Try to get any tool in the arsenal of the team from a financial level, et cetera, to write for PR that's outside of it. And then what I also want to emphasize is optimizing for AI searchability. I do this a lot at Boundless. This is a QR code if you do want tips around optimizing for AI, not only SEO, any messaging frameworks, et cetera. Deeper breakdowns, I highly recommend this. And for closing out the talk, I want to give us the sentiment that we have been marketing for ourselves, as we have seen it on Twitter, et cetera. It took us where we are now, but I think it is time for us to collectively kind of man up a little bit and take a larger approach, thinking bigger. I think we're closer than we've ever been, actually, and we really see the light at the end of the tunnel. The adoption that we wanted, that the whole economy and adjacent systems are running on blockchain, is closer than ever, and it is on us to make it feel so. The last thing to do there, aside from improving the limitations that we have on the technological level, that a lot of teams, including the Ethereum Foundation and Boundless, are working on, and many other teams, is to tell a better story. It's how we position this, it's the bridging that we build between the technology we've built and the world that hasn't adopted yet, and to really show the conviction that we have in the worldview that we started out with, and to emphasize the technology that will actually get us there. So with that, I would like to encourage, oh, there was one more slide, but it said just think bigger and be boundless. But yeah, so that is our job, is to tell a better story. And please think bigger and think collectively. Thank you very much.